Mas, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for me being a part of your nice event.
I wanted to ask you a couple questions, and I think we'll get to China a little bit, but everybody's been talking about China and Xi Jinping and the Party Congress, and I think maybe overlooked was that Japan had elections. And Abe seems
amazing.
Poised after a big political comeback. So what does that look like for Japan? We know where China is at in its history right now. Where's Japan at in its history? How do you benchmark the importance of this most recent election?
I think this event or election could become a pivotal election in a way that not just because that Abe actually took, I think this is his fifth success in gaining the victory as LDP leader, but I think that this gives significant majority. I think it's more than 2/3 of the Diet, including coalition parties, as well as some parties which are actually for the change for the Constitution. So this could be a big, change for the Japanese population or Japanese nationals, how they see and prepare for the next few decades about how the Japan wants to posture itself in the global political space, I think.
And where do you see Japan in the next 5 to 10 years? What does Japan look like 5 years from now, based on the things that we're seeing right now?
Okay. I believe that next 5 years is a great time for Japan because of this Olympic boom and then political stability. I think even though Japan fundamentally has a risk relative to the shrinking population over the next probably 3 to 4 decades, it's not really still surfacing as a significant risk. And relative to, I think, the investment opportunities for putting, from external perspective, but also from Japanese perspective, this is a great opportunity for us to, I guess, push our technology advancement to prepare for the next 3 to 4 decades that, as I said, as a risk for population reduction.
Well, I wonder if I could ask you to say even a little bit more about that, because usually when people talk about Japan, and when I talk about Japan, people say, well, the demographic situation is terrible. This country is old and it's on the way out. There's no possible way that this is a good idea to invest here, let alone that Japan could project power in East Asia. How do you think about that demographic situation? Obviously it's a risk, but you seem to think that maybe through technology it's more of an opportunity for Japan than anything else.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think and this is more like a historical way that if you could look at, Japan has gone through many different types of natural disasters. And that's the time that Japan get tighter and try to find and become a little bit more creative. We're not so creative as like Americans, but I think we know how to accommodate ourselves to the different nature or natural environment. Just as you saw in like a tsunami or earthquake in last decade that you have observed, and we're actually good at turning around and take it as a sort of advantage to find a way to be successful in the next years to come. And from that angle, I could see, for example, I think there's just recently I heard that even in the United States, the seaweed as a potential way to, I guess, develop the energy and so forth, but Japan is ahead of those. And so surrounded by the seacoast, Japanese knows how to sort of efficiently manage the economic growth. And so from that angle, I think as long as we could succeed similar way as we have been doing in technological advancement, these robot things or AIs, those kind of things, I think we could be very still successful next 3 to 4 decades, I believe.
Well, that's fascinating. What do you think about China then? So from your perspective, is China a sleeping giant? Is China poised to sort of become the dominant power in East Asia and Japan is just going to have to sign along to what Japan is doing? Or do you see real problems with China, with the debt problem and like other China bears seem to think?
Well, definitely China has a lot of risk in terms of debt, in terms of the big gap, the wealth and then the poor people. And that's going to be I think an ongoing challenge for them. But fundamentally, what I believe that the problem or challenge for China, just as we saw even going back 1,500 years ago and so forth, whenever they have the emperor, when they have a governance, then they always have the issue of corruption. And that despite the fact that they tried to put a modern system, even in very early days, like imperial examination systems, which many other countries followed, yet they haven't been able to find a way to make it work in a political, I think that the stability and always kind of embedded risk or turmoil or trigger of turmoil that you see that. And I think it's going to be the same for even the 21st century of China, where Xi Jinping is trying to extend next his 5-year reign. But the questions are, I think there's a rumors that whether or not he's going to become a chairman of Communist Party or not, which originally Mao Zedong's time was the piece that Mao used as his personal reign for more than 30 years. So is that the only way that Xi Jinping can control the China? And that's the things that I think we will be very much interested in. I'm actually very interested in seeing how it's going to turn around.
Yeah, it's a fascinating experiment that China is running. Yeah. For both China and Japan, the U.S. relationship is very important. I think a lot of people would say that China and the U.S. are on a path towards maybe not so productive relations. Would you agree with that or disagree with that? And then also, based on some of the things that President Trump has said and based on the current level of the Japan-U.S. relationship, do you think that that strong alliance goes forward, or do you have any concerns that that's at risk?
Well, I don't really see the risk if we see U.S. and China alone, and then sitting Japan in the middle, because just as Japan has done last 50, 60 years, working closely with the United States, and then sort of keeping the relationship with also together with the United States, open up China as a big market, big opportunities to bring them to the Pacific space. I think as long as those three countries' relation goes well, and even though there might be some, tweaking around between those three countries, that's okay. The risks are the other players surrounding those three countries. And that's the thing that probably between the Cold War space at the time to maybe last, I think, 5 years. And then today, if you compare last 5 years versus today, there's a definitely different players coming in. One is Russia, and other definitely is North Korea.
And, can you say a little bit more about that? Because I know that you and I both think that North Korea is the real wild card here. What does that mean for the region in particular? What does North Korea mean for Japan? How do you see Japan helping to manage that conflict, if at all?
I don't really understand, Kim Jong-il's, motivation, but I think from the Japanese perspective, we don't understand what he's trying to do. And it's interesting that if you look at China, it doesn't seem that they don't understand him and the country either. I think they are having a difficulty in controlling that. On the other side, he's sending his colleagues or the executives to Russia, and relative to Russia's sort of desire to grow and making sure that his the country's stability is maintained relative to the using the external opportunities such as North Korea. I think this could pose a bit of risk in the region.
So you think Russia could play a major spoiling role in East Asia going forward in the next couple of years?
As long as China cannot control North Korea, I don't think that the U.S. can control that. Japan cannot control that.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.